Hello children, welcome back to chemistry session. In previous session we have seen colloidal solutions and suspensions, and we had also discussed about difference between suspensions, true solutions and colloidal solution. In today's session we are going to talk about techniques to separate components of a mixture or methods to separate components of a mixture. Let us start today's section, children. Techniques to separate components of a mixture. Techniques or methods to separate the components of a mixture. In daily life, we use the methods like hand picking method, sieving method, filtration method, centrifugation method, etc. These techniques based on the physical properties of the components of the mixture. We use method like hand picking. Hand picking method is used to separate rice, stones and mud particles from rice and pulses, because this hand picking method is based on the size and shape of the components of the mixture. Suppose rice and pulses. When you take the rice and pulses, we want to segregate or we want to separate stones and mud particles from rice and pulses, because there is a difference in the size of the rice and pulses compared to that of mud and stone particles. This is the way we can separate, because there is a difference in the size of the mud particles and stone as well as rice and pulses. So we use hand picking method. So we can pick stones and mud from rice and pulses. Next, we can also use filtration method. So when we use filtration method, when one of the component of the mixture is soluble in the water and other component is insoluble in the water, then we can choose or we can prefer filtration method. For example, we prepare tea. After preparation of tea, we can filtrate that, because while preparing tea, we add tea powder to the milk. So after preparation of tea, we filtrate the extract or we filtrate the tea. After filtrating, we get the clear liquid and tea powder or tea leaves present over the filtrate. That technique is called as filtration. And centrifugation technique. Centrifugation is the advanced method of churning process. In earlier days, people used churning to separate components of the milk. Suppose if you want to separate cream from milk, then in earlier days people used churner to separate components of the mixture. Nowadays, we are not using that. So, centrifugation technique is the advanced method of churning. So, advanced method of centrifugation is based on the churning process. So there are many techniques like sedimentation, decantation. Suppose if you want to separate sediments from the impure water, then when you place undisturbed for some time, then all the sediments are settled down. Then we can separate unclear liquid from the mixture. Sediments are settled at the bottom. So this is called sedimentation. So this is the way we can separate components of the mixture. This is on the basis of properties of the components of the mixture. So in this session, we will discuss the techniques like evaporation technique and centrifugation technique and separating funnel technique. So in this chapter, we will discuss remaining techniques, children. But in this session, we are talking these three techniques like evaporation technique, centrifugation technique and separating funnel technique. Let us talk about evaporation technique. Let us talk about evaporation technique, children. Suppose if you take salt water or sea water, when you place sea water or salt water in a container and place the container which contain sea water in the sunlight for 3 to 4 hours, So after some time you notice that fine crystals of salt present at the container. So when you keep more time, then you can observe more number of crystals present in that. This is because we place seawater or salt water in the container and we place the container in the sunlight, and the water molecules evaporate from the container by the sun's energy or sun's heat. Then particles of solid excuse me, particles of solid or particles of crystals of salt remains in the container. Then water is evaporated from the container and salt particles are left behind the container. This is called evaporation technique. But according to your textbook, they have considered a beaker. Half a beaker filled with the water. Half a beaker filled with the water, and the mouth of the beaker is covered with the watch glass. This is watch glass, children. We place watch glass over the beaker and we add few drops of ink. It may be either red ink or blue ink. We add few drops of ink on the watch glass. Now we have to heat the beaker. We have to heat the beaker with the help of spirit lamp or Bunsen burner. So on heating, the water gets evaporated. The water gets boiled. So when water gets boiled, the water produces water vapor. Whenever the water vapor touches the watch glass, then the watch glass contains few drops of ink. Then the ink is made up of different dyes and water, children, because ink is not a single substance. Ink is a mixture. It's a mixture of dyes, different dyes and water. On heating, the water evaporates from the drops of ink. The water gets evaporated. The water gets evaporated from the ink. And what is left over the watch glass? This is watch glass, children. What is left behind the watch glass? This watch glass contains ink drops. The ink drops which is in different dyes. So based on this technique, by using evaporation technique, we can separate components of the ink, because many people think that ink is a single substance, but ink is not a single substance. It is a mixture of two or more substances. In general, ink is made up of different dyes and water. By using this experiment or by using this activity, we can separate components of the ink. You may ask the question that why don't we directly put watch glass on the spirit lamp or Bunsen burner? We should not place watch glass directly over the spirit lamp or Bunsen burner. This is because when we directly place watch glass over the Bunsen burner, then this ink sticks to the watch glass. Then separation may not be takes place at that case. To avoid that, we should place watch glass over the beaker which has filled with the water. So by using evaporation technique, we can separate the components of the ink, because ink is a mixture of different dyes and water, because water is a volatile compound. So on heating, water gets evaporated from the mixture of ink. Next technique, centrifugation technique. We have already discussed that centrifugation technique is the advanced technique of churning. In earlier days, people used churning or churners to separate components of the milk. But nowadays, we have the technique centrifugation to separate components of the milk, because we have seen in previous section that milk is not a single substance. Milk is a type of colloid. Milk is a colloid. That means milk contains two components, dispersed phase and dispersed medium. Dispersed phase is in liquid state, dispersed medium also in liquid phase. That's why milk is a colloidal substance. So we want to separate components of the milk. By centrifugation technique, we can separate the components of the milk. By doing the experiment or by doing this activity, we take some amount of milk in a test tube or centrifuge tube. We take some amount or few ml of unturned milk in a centrifuge tube, and we place the centrifuge tube in a centrifugation machine. When we switch on the centrifugation machine, gentle spinning of centrifugation gives out two different layers. It is nothing but centrifuge tube, children. First we place unturned milk in this, and we place this centrifuge tube. This is called centrifuge tube, children. We place this centrifuge tube in a centrifugation machine. So gentle spinning of centrifugation which separate this milk as two components. One is present at the top layer and the other present at the bottom. The components of the mixture are separated into two layers. One as low density layer and another one as high density layer. The high density layer reaches the bottom of the centrifuge tube, and the low density layer which is present at the top of the centrifuge. This is because there is a difference in the densities of the components of the mixture. So this is the way we can separate cream from the milk or butter from the milk. In general, butter or cream has low density or less density. That's why which floats over the milk or which reaches the top of the centrifuge tube. And the components which has high density, that is nothing but water or some other fats, which is present at the bottom of the centrifuge tube. So this is the way we can separate components of the milk by centrifugation technique. Besides separating components of the milk, we can also use the centrifugation technique in the diagnostic laboratories, because in diagnostic laboratories we test blood samples and urine samples. We take little amount of blood samples and urine samples in a centrifuge tube, we put on the centrifugation machine, and gentle spinning of centrifugation gives out two different layers, and that is used to identify the person is suffering from the either bacterial disease or virus disease. So we can also use the centrifugation technique to separate the components of the mixture of the milk, as well as we can also use the centrifugation in the diagnostic laboratories for blood samples and urine samples, for testing blood and urine samples. And nowadays we are using this centrifugation technique in homes as well as dairies to separate the components of the milk. So nowadays we are using centrifugation technique to separate components of the milk in homes as well as dairies. But in earlier days we have used churner, and the process name is churning, to separate the components of the mixture. Excuse me, children. So this is the way we can separate components of the mixture by centrifugation technique. Next, let us talk about separating funnel technique. I hope you are able to follow, children. Next one, separating funnel technique. So we use separating funnel technique to separate two immiscible liquids. Two immiscible liquids. So immiscible liquid mixture can be separated by separating funnel technique. What do you mean by immiscible liquids? Immiscible liquids means the liquids which won't mix together. I am repeating children, the liquids which won't mix together. Such kind of liquids are called immiscible liquids. For example, oil and water. What do you notice when we add few drops of oil to water? Does it soluble? Do they mix together? No. The oil floats on water. This is because this separating funnel method is based on the difference between the densities of two liquids. Remember children, separating funnel method is based on the difference between the densities of the two liquids. The liquid which has low density which present at the top layer, and the liquid which has high density which is present at the bottom of the separating funnel. So this is used to separate two immiscible liquid mixture. Let us see the diagram of separating funnel children. It is something like this. This is the diagram of separating funnel. And this is the cap of separating funnel. This is the cork of separating funnel. So when you turn on, the liquid will flow through the or pass through the separating funnel, and we place the beaker below this. Let us take immiscible liquid mixture in a separating funnel. This is separating funnel children. We have to add immiscible liquid mixture in a separating funnel. So while adding immiscible liquid mixture in a separating funnel, we should open the cap of the separating funnel, and we should close the cork. We should close the stopper. You can also call it as stopper. We should close the stopper, and we have to open the cap of the separating funnel. Then through this we can add liquid mixture children. Immiscible liquid mixture. For example, this is oil and this is water. I told you that oil has low density, that's why which floats on water. Water has high density, which is present at the bottom of the separating funnel. When you open the stopper, then the liquid which has high density will separate first. That means here first we can separate water, because water has high density than that of oil. That's why the high density liquid can be separated by separating funnel technique. So after completely separating water, then we can turn off the stopper. Then when we turn off the stopper, then other liquid which has low density liquid is left behind the or remains in the separating funnel. So this is the way we can separate two immiscible liquids by separating funnel technique. This separating funnel technique is based on the densities of the two immiscible liquids. So the liquid one has low density which is present at the top layer, and the liquid which has high density which is present at the bottom of the separating funnel. Example, kerosene oil. Kerosene plus water. Here kerosene has low density liquid and water has high density liquid. That's why kerosene floats on water. And another one, chloroform. ClCl3 is chloroform and water. In this mixture, chloroform has high density. Chloroform has high density than water. Water has less density. Here chloroform has high density, that's why when you take a mixture of chloroform and water, they don't mix together. Due to the different densities, they don't mix together. Here chloroform has high density which is present at the bottom of the separating funnel, and water has less density which is flows over the chloroform. By separating funnel technique, we can separate the components of chloroform and water. So this is the way we can separate components of the mixture. So in today's section, we have discussed three techniques, children. Evaporation technique. Evaporation technique is easy to separate components of the mixture. In that, one of the component has volatile nature. For example, if you want to separate components of the ink is a mixture of different dyes and liquid water. There, water has volatile substance. That's why by evaporation technique we can separate components of the mixture of ink. And this evaporation technique is based on the mixtures must contain one of the component as volatile nature. The second technique, centrifugation technique. Centrifugation technique means gentle spinning of liquid forms two layers. One has low density layer, another one has high density layer. Low density layer present over the high density layer. This is mostly useful in diagnostic laboratories and dairies to separate the components of the mixture. And third technique, separating funnel. Separating funnel technique is based on the densities of the two immiscible liquids. Immiscible liquids means which don't mix together, and the liquid which has low density which floats over the high density liquid, which is used to separate two immiscible liquids mixture like oil and water, kerosene and water, and chloroform and water. And this is the diagram of separating funnel. So this is today's section, children. I hope you understand today's section. We'll meet in next section. Thank you.